Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recap episode of Flow Over Fear. And today I'm going to recap the interview I just had with Bob Wheatley. And Bob is the author of Our Heart's Desire, How Our Stories Reveal the Thing That We Want Most. And it's a great book. It is very, very well written. And it really tells stories about stories. And it does them in such a way that it helps us to learn more about God and how to build a relationship with God. And I know that for many, that may be an uncomfortable subject to talk about. And it's uncomfortable for a reason. It's uncomfortable because, it's something that a lot of us don't know about. It relies on faith. And a lot of us, many of us may tend to be experiencing hard things, sometimes tragic things, very traumatic things that we think are way too much for us. And we wonder to ourselves how, if there is a God, how God could let those kinds of things happen to us. But I think that's why it's such an important conversation to have on this show, because, one of the ways in which we can rise above fear is through faith. Whether we choose to or not, whether we choose to look at how we shape our relationship with fear related to faith, it is a part of it. And so it's something that would be important, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about it. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that it is something that has been important in my life, that faith has been important in my life and my story. When I was in my addiction, when I was experiencing heavy anxiety and panic attacks and depression, I didn't have a good spiritual relationship with God. I hated God. I didn't like him for what was happening to me. I didn't think and the hardest part is that I believed in a God. But I just didn't know why I had to go through what I was going through. But it was finally when I did actually start to heal, and when I got sober, and the experience that I had in doing so, where I realized that I was just so out of control of my own life that I had to let go of control and relinquish control and just give it to a higher power, surrender my life to a higher power. That's when I did start to heal, when I started to heal. And so having a higher power in my life, having God in my life is a very important thing. And there are ebbs and flows with that, where experiences recently, I felt a bit of a spiritual void where I haven't felt it as strongly, that God's been in my life if I'm just being completely vulnerable. And so talking to people like Bob is helpful for me to know, where that's coming from and maybe how to address it. And so I wanted to ask him some of those questions today to talk through a lot of why we feel the way we do and why having these conversations about God is so difficult. Regardless of what religion or what God you believe in, a higher power of some kind that is a bigger intelligence than just the world. It's hard not to believe that. Part of the nature of my belief is the fact that in this infinite universe, there's so much outside of our own knowledge that we don't understand, that it's not irrational to think that there is a God out there, that there is a God in some way that we don't understand. And that's one of the points that Bob brought home in this conversation is that we just have to relinquish the idea that we have to understand everything about God. We don't have to understand everything about God perfectly. We don't. Whether it's free will versus our will or God's will, that balance there, or whether it's this idea of knowing exactly what God is
We can accept that we don't understand it in the same way that we accept that we don't understand what's at the edges of our universe or beyond, and that we are constantly learning about those kinds of things. So that's a starting point as far as that's concerned. I mean, when we look at some of the scripture on any religious front, we see a lot of things that we're conflicted by. And if we can at least look at the things that resonate with us and find the similarities, find the good, at least we can move forward in that way. And as it relates to stories, Bob was, telling us how the stories that we tell, reveal what we want most. And to kind of give away the entire premise of the book, what we want most is God. We want to know that we have a meaning, and that God exists in this world, that he wants what's best for us. And we talked a lot about it. I asked if we're doing ourselves a disservice by dreaming for ourselves. And the reality is that, one of the things that Bob said is that we just have to dream better. We have to set better goals. A lot of the goals we set may be superficial and may not be aligned with the spiritual meaning. But if instead we look at if we begin with the end in mind, knowing that if we look at the end of our life and we look at life, that if we have an eternal consciousness and we can look back on our life at something that would be meaningful to us, that's what we should be dreaming of. Not for the money or the cars or whatever it might be, but for that absolute meaning. And again, regardless of what spiritual path you're on, that should resonate. It should resonate that at the end of our lives, we should look back and know that we are contributing to something with meaning. That is something that can help us to rise above fear. And one of the other questions I asked him was with regard to his spiritual origin story. And from Bob's perspective, he mentioned that he had grown up with God, but that he didn't really feel that spiritual awakening to the extent that he had a relationship with God until he was about 25. And at that time, he had experienced three major negative transformational things in his life. His business was failing. He had just ended a 4-year career in baseball, and a very, very a relationship that he was in had just ended. And all three of those things compiled on each other at one time, and they were overwhelming and challenging for him. But it forced him to lean into God more and to learn more about God and to learn how that path could help him continue to grow and become a person that was living in God's will and not just his own. And I think we can all learn something from that. And I think it's important that we look closely at that when we experience our own challenges, as big as they may be. And I don't want it, and Bob didn't want to, and I certainly don't want to minimize the pain that we might experience in certain situations. The pain of loss, the pain of trauma, the pain of grief, and the pain of fear. That's painful. But one of the important things is that bad things do and may happen what we can take from that is that if bad things happen, what can we learn from them and how can we grow from them? How can we experience those as spiritual experiences? How can they wake us up? In Bob's instance, it woke him up to a newer path that he could take, and it helped him to thrive. If we could take some of those bad situations and turn them into something where we can thrive, we can have a reason to find hope. And hope in this world is very important. Bob's book is a powerful, open up to a lot of different stories that we've experienced in a different way. And a lot of these stories revolve around, when we watch them, we want to have this catharsis. And Bob said that there were really three elements of catharsis. We have the desire, the delay, and the delivery. And ultimately, we always want to live in this moment of catharsis where we can get that. But a lot of times it has to be delayed. That paradise that we want to experience is delayed. And a lot of these stories revolve around the same kind of progression. It starts with paradise, people living in paradise, and that paradise being broken down in some way. And then and then it gets the hero's journey is trying to get back to that point of paradise. So there was a lot of great things in this episode, a lot of things to take away. And I would hope that people, when you listen to this episode, if you struggle, if you wrestle with the idea of spirituality, if you wrestle with the idea of God, come into it with an open mind. It's not my intent, nor is it Bob's intent to push anything on anybody, but to have these conversations to openly discuss the idea of a spiritual higher power that can help us to heal and to help us to grow and to help us to move from fear to flow, to help us experience our best lives. So with that, I thank you for joining me. I thank you for engaging in this discussion, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.